Hey everyone, it's Miss Cooperud. Welcome to lesson 1-13 on basic ratios and how to use those basic ratios to find proportions and how to use different proportions to find the basic ratio. So that interwoven mix. So let's start out refreshing ourselves what basic ratios are. Basic ratios are when we take a really much bigger ratio or even a tiny much bigger and we try to cut it apart and shrink it down so the numbers are more manageable. Let's look at what that actually looks like. So to do that, I will pause and show you my blocks. Now, remember, you've heard me say this before. Don't just watch me play with math. You should be playing with math. We're looking for 24 of something and 36 of something. That's a lot. Those are big numbers. Now, when we think about ratios, this is really, really important. So pause everything else and listen. Ratios talk about something that kind of have a relationship with each other. We would not put two things in a ratio that totally have nothing to do with each other. So let me show you a couple of things around the classroom that I found that we really would not put in a ratio because there's no reason to compare them. So pause and I'll pause this and then grab them and show you. Okay, here's an example. A box of stair cards. They're like little pictures where you have to look at it for a little while. That's why I call it stare. You stare at it, and then there's questions that you have to answer on the back to see if you can figure out if you remember, and a light bulb. Would I put this into a relationship, the number of stair cards and a light bulb? Well, no, because it doesn't matter. They don't have anything to do with each other. So take a big old, let me pause this and show you what we're going to do here. Okay, ratio of stair cards to light bulbs. Are we going to do it? That doesn't make any sense. They really don't have a relationship. We're not going to set them in a ratio to each other. Man, I'm having a hard time getting my... This is silly. All right. What about a ratio of green colored pencils to yellow colored pencils? Would we put those in a relationship, in a ratio together? Sure we would. Yeah, we would definitely do that. Oops, that's supposed to be a big old check mark. We would definitely do that. They're both colored pencils. Maybe we're making a project and we need the green and the yellow to share and do the project. Those make sense to put in a ratio together. All right. What about a ratio of Milky Ways to Twizzlers? How many Milky Ways we collected when we're trick-or-treating compared to how many Twizzlers we collected? Sure, they have a relationship. They're both candy, and we're collecting them at Halloween. Absolutely, those make sense. So we're going to put a check and say, yeah, that makes sense to put in a ratio to each other. All right. What about the ratio of rocks to pattern blocks? Well, hopefully you're saying no. Rocks and pattern blocks, they don't really have a relationship right now. So it's kind of a question, why would we set rocks and pattern blocks into a relationship? No, ratios are about showing the relationship between two things that have a distinctive relationship. So rocks and pattern blocks, not really. Kind of weird to set them to each other. So the answer is no. We're going to Ghostbusters that out. No, we're not going to use those two things in a ratio with each other. All right. What about the ratio of big rocks to small rocks? Well, I hope you're saying, wait, yeah, they're both rocks. And I'll tell you that I collected both of these while I was walking along the shore of, these are particular Lake Michigan, walking along the shoreline of Lake Michigan, collected these rocks. So they're both rocks that were collected along the lake shore of Michigan, and they have a relationship because they're both rocks, obviously. So yes, absolutely, that would make sense for us to make a ratio. So make sure that when you're thinking of ratios, you're thinking of two things that already have some connection, two things that have some relationship together already, and then you're talking about the numbers that are associated within that relationship. That's what ratios are for, not just to take two totally different things and stuff them together and take their numbers. That's not ratios. All right, so your task is to pause this video and go find something that is in a relationship, that has some relationship to itself, that is 24 and 36. Those are big numbers, and I get that. So it could be crayons. You could do crayons to pencils if you have a bunch of crayons or pencils or markers lying around. You could do rocks like I did. You could go out and find big rocks to little rocks. It's fall. It's super easy to find leaves. So you could find, you might want to do that outside, just saying, because they get a little crunchy. Maybe your family doesn't want them inside. But you could go find like 24 of one kind of leaf and 36 of another kind. So here's what I'm using. Now, lucky me, I have this stuff around the classroom. So I'm using 24 yellow blocks and, it's hard to even get that in the picture, 36 blue blocks. So here is what I wrote. Ratio of blue blocks to yellow blocks. Is that something that we could compare? Sure. They're both blocks. If you have Legos, this might be an easy one for you. You could find 24 2x4 Legos and 24 and 36 2x2s or something like that. So find something that you can use, because don't just watch me play with math. You should be playing with math. Pause the video and find that stuff and come right back. Okay, you're back. So I am starting and thinking on page 39 in our workbook. So please have page 39 out and be looking at it while you're watching this part of the video and while you're playing with math. So here's our ratio, 24 to 36. So I'm going to tilt this down so we can see this. There it is. 24 to 36. Oh, yep, if I put it right there, you can still see it. 24 to 36. And here it is, 24 to 36. 24 to 36. Now, these are really big numbers, and it's hard to think about them. What a basic ratio does, it says we can cut both of these numbers in the same number of groups, and the smaller numbers, first of all, they're easier, and secondly, they're in the same ratio. So first of all, one of the strategies that you see on page 39 says, hey, 36, 24, they're both even numbers. I know I can cut them in half. So you're going to take your whatever you did and divide it in half. There's that. So now I have two groups of the yellow. Let's see if I can do this right. Now I have two groups of the blue. Look at that. So now my ratio is what to what? What did I just change it to? Look at this. I can even put it into groups. The ratio stays the same, but I've just cut it into two different groups. So now my ratio, instead of being 24 to 36, I found an equivalent ratio by cutting it in half. Now my ratio is 12 to 18. 12 to 18. See how it's stayed the same ratio, but I just made two groups. Now, you might also notice, wait a minute, hold on, 12 and 18. I know something about that. I know, again, they're both divisible by 2. They're both even numbers, so we can cut them in half. Let's try that. So let's cut this one in half. There it is, and cut this one in half. There it is. Now I'm going to push those off to the side. I'm just going to leave those there. So now I've cut it in half again. Now, look at that. See how the same ratio, but the numbers are getting smaller and smaller. All right. So now if I cut those in half, now I'm at 6 is in a relationship with 9. 6 to 9. Am I at the basic ratio yet? Well, the answer is actually no, because I can still cut these groups. So I'm going to get rid of that one and keep cutting, because I'm still trying to get down to the smallest amount that I can divide these two, both of them by the same, that's not 1. But now I have a 6 and a 9. I can't cut by, whoops, there we go. I don't know what, there we go. I can't cut it by 2 because 9, if you divide 9 by 2, you have 4.5. So we don't want any fractions or decimals. We want it to be even. So 6 and 9, I can't divide by 2, but you might know a number that I could divide both of them. I hope you're saying 3. So I could divide both of these into 3 groups. 1, 2, 3. 1, 2, 3. Look at that. Now I'm going to get rid of those other 2 groups and look at this. Here, that's the basic ratio. It's still in the same relationship. The basic ratio from 24 to 36, the basic ratio is 2 to 3. 2 to 3. 2 yellows compared to 3 blues. Now you say, okay, I saw you do that. Hopefully you did it right along with me. But I also want to show you something cool. You might be able to notice that if you're continually cutting it into those equal groups of something is multiplication, or inversely, it's division. So you might say 2 times some number would get me to 24. Do you know what that number is? Multiply by 12. 2 groups of 12 gets me to 24. Now, if you multiply the first number in the ratio by 12 to get to 24, very much like fractions, you have to do it to the second part of the ratio as well. You have to multiply that times 12. Is 3 times 12 36? The answer is yes, it is. So that can be one way that you can know if ratios are equivalent, is if the first number you multiply by any number at all gives you the first number of an equivalent ratio, then the second number you have to multiply it by that exact same number, and then it gives you the second number of the equivalent ratio. Incidentally, you can go the other way. So I'm going to pause and erase a second. All right, now you'll notice I put the arrows going the other way. If we know that 24 to 36, both of those numbers, 24 and 36, we both know that they're both divisible by 12. We can divide them by 12. You can actually go the other way, and you don't have to sort of cut and cut and cut and cut and cut apart like we did here. If you know that they just are both divisible by 12, you can just divide the one side by 12. 36 divided by 12 to get to 3. Divide the other side by 12. 24 divided by 12 gives you 2. So you can go up or you can go down. If you're going smaller numbers, you need to be dividing the equivalent ratio to get a smaller number. If you want to get a bigger equivalent ratio, you can be multiplying. We can start with 2 to 3, and we can multiply it by 12 to get to 24 to 36. Now, let's pause and see, could that have worked from the very beginning? Could we have not broken and broken and broken all of these pieces apart? Could we just have divided them into 12 pieces? Hold on. All right, take a look at this. We sure could have. If we would have known that the greatest common factor, the biggest number that these can be divided into, that they both can be divided into, that was 12, we could have, from the start, we could have just divided them into 12 equal pieces. And that might have been a little faster, but do not get confused. Either way works. You can divide the numbers by one time and get this big thing, or you could divide them by smaller numbers and get smaller and smaller and smaller and smaller until there's no way you can divide them by the same number anymore. That's the essence of a basic ratio. There's nothing that we can divide these groups into that will stay a whole number. So this is the basic ratio. All right, let's look at number 1. We're starting with the same numbers, 2 to 3 is equivalent to 10 to something. So we're going to start out 2 to 3. You've already got it. There it is, 2 to 3. Now, we need to change this 2 into a 10. How are we going to do it? I'm going to tip my camera down here. How are we going to change that 2 into 10? Well, we've already kind of done it. 2. We're going to add another 2 and another 2 and another 2 and another 2. And you know, repeated addition, the same number, add, we call that multiplication. Repeated addition is multiplication. So there's a 2, but we had to add more 2's and more 2's and more 2's until we got it to 10. We're starting with 3. I think you know what we're going to do in order to keep the same ratio. We can't change the ratio here, but we can make the numbers a lot bigger. We made the 2 to 10, we're going to do this exact same thing for the number that started at a 3. That's what this means. 2 compared to 10, 2 to 10 is in the same ratio, the same relationship as 10 to a mystery number. We just found that mystery number, 3, 6, 9, 12, 15. So we know A equals 15. Let's look at that if we would have done it sort of in a ratio table. Remember, we can skip rows, so don't get confused. This one was 2 to 3. This one was 10 to some mystery number. So we could have done it with multiplication and division. 2 times something gives us 10. What is that something? 5. If we do 2 times 5 gets us to 10, we have to do the same thing. Instead of taking this 2 and we gave it 5 groups of 2 right there, we got to do the same thing with the 3. We gave that 5 groups. 3 times 5 groups, and that gets us to not a question mark, but 15. All right, not going to lie to you. If this is a little tricky for you, it is so much easier when you have something to model it out with. Our brain thinks differently when we play with math, when we model it out, than when we look at it on the computer or when we write it on paper. It actually is a different type of learning your brain does. So please, please, please don't just watch me play with math. Find something around, find something in your house, cut little pieces of paper. Truly, you could cut 24 tiny little squares and color them blue. You could cut 36 little squares and color them yellow. You can do it. Actually, if I was you, I would just color a paper first and then cut it into squares. That would be a lot easier than coloring teeny tiny little squares. But do it. Do something. Get your materials, and then you can do math. And then once you have those materials, use them over and over for every question. They will work for every question. See you next time.